Okay. Tonight we're going to do our anniversary party. Oh, thank you for the 6 years. 6 years of 530 Warriors. It's crazy, huh? Seems like it is. Okay, we're going to start on Daf Kuf, which is right on the top, page 100. See that? Thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. In this chus of our learning, we should have the Beis HaMikdash. Learning Lili Nishma, Sava Golda Bas Baruch Binyamin, and Nisan al-Sam ben Metzia, and for Shleima for Abu David and Sarah. Whoever else needs a refuah Shleima. How's your father doing? For Shleima for Dalia. Getzel Eliezer Ben. Like here. Ben Fagetsipar. Dalia Getzel Eliezer. Okay. The Aliyah's been over. Okay. The Mishnah starts off like this. Hamachlef para b'chamar v'yolda. Someone exchanges a cow for a donkey, and the cow gave birth. Now, but the way it works over here is it's a purchase. He's purchasing a cow. He's purchasing a donkey. There's two people, and one's purchasing a cow, one's purchasing a donkey, but they're bartering. They're just doing an exchange. Now, the one that's purchasing the cow doesn't have the cow actually with him. So the one that's purchasing the cow is not actually pulling the cow. He is acquiring the cow when the other person pulls the donkey. So the cow is being acquired to him, even though he doesn't see the cow right here. It's not right here. He's getting it. The cow is back somewhere else, wherever it is. We'll see. And so now it gives birth. So the purchaser of the one that's acquiring the cow says that it gave birth after you pulled the donkey, which means the offspring is mine. The one that's selling it says, oh no, the offspring was born before I pulled the donkey, and therefore the offspring is mine. The seller is claiming that it's his. So they don't have a timestamp. Yeah, they don't have a timestamp, right? The same thing would apply if someone sold a maidservant, also and it gave birth. That the seller is claiming that the maidservant gave birth before she was sold, and the purchaser is saying, no, I have the maidservant plus the child, which would be a slave or another maidservant. This one is claiming that it was before I sold it that this happened. Another one is saying it's after I bought it. That's when this happened. And we're going to see in the Gemara right now. We're saying that they're both definite. Each one is claiming that I know 100% sure. Okay. So isn't this a yachlaiku? Then it says yachlaiku. Some holds that whenever you have a doubt, you divide it. Right? King Solomon. Well, we're going to see in the Gemara that there's two ways of learning this. It could be that each one is not definite. Each one is maybe. But we'll wait for the Gemara. There's two slaves. Echad gadol v'echad katan. One is a older one and one is younger. Katan means probably a child. Gadol means he's an adult. Same thing applies to two fields. One is a large field and one is a small field. And what happens is, the purchaser over here is saying, I bought the bigger one. The other one says, I'm not actually sure which one you purchased. So there he gets the bigger one. Why? Because Bari B'Shema. One of them is definite, one of them is maybe. So one that's definite wins.
The person who might be premature say out of, I guess, because he wants to have that status now. Someone might have 50% or something. He influenced to say that
to change his claim.
He has a really big incentive.
Right. Right. I hear what you're asking. It does. But when it comes to a property, or when it comes to a slave, they're acquired with money. That's why it's. That's why the acquisition takes place, even though they're not right here. If someone paid for it, then that works. Your question.
Testimony separate.
Yeah. Your question is maybe what you're asking is that they have if someone is believed to say a definite claim, and then the other one is saying a maybe claim, so the definite wins, but shouldn't the maybe be believed with a migu that he could have said definite? Right?
What is definite?
Okay.
You put it much better.
But the answer to that is that it doesn't have a question. No, it doesn't have a question. Is not if we believe him or not. Maybe we believe him. Migu would help us believe him. The point is that we believe him that he doesn't know, which is fine, but he still doesn't know. So we trust him. We trust him that he doesn't know. Okay. Yeah, but our problem is not
We're saying,
trust.
what do we trust? The trust.
Our
We trust that he doesn't know. Because that's what he said.
Just because he could, if he wanted to lie, he would have said something else. That doesn't mean that he's a great guy and we should make him win every case. Right? So, next case. The seller saying that I sold the smaller one. And the purchaser says, I'm not really sure which one it was. So, so over there, same thing. Bari v'shema. It doesn't matter if it's the seller that's the bari or if the buyer that's the bari. The rule is that he only gets the smaller one because the seller claimed that's what the definite claim. This one says definitely it was the bigger one, and this one says it was definitely the smaller one. So then there the seller has to swear that he sold him the smaller one. What's coming out over here is that he's claiming the purchaser has a claim against the seller. Give me my field, give me my evet, give me whatever it is. And the guy is admitting partially. He's saying, I know I owe it to you, but I owe you only the smaller one. So then he's a moide b'miktas, so he has to swear. We'll see exactly. It's slightly more complex than just that, but we'll see. That's the Rashi Prakim. This one says, Any idea? I don't know. Was there many idea? This one says, I don't know. Number two, maybe. The din is okay. We had over here, I think, 5 cases. Case number 1 was Yachlaiku. Case number 5 is Yachlaiku. Case number 2 and 3 were Bari B'Shema Bari Yada. The one that's definite wins. Case number 4 was that he actually had to take an oath. Okay. The Gemara says, back to the first case, where each one is claiming that it was born after, or it was born before, right? And that's going to give them the offspring. Why should we divide it? Let's say why don't we say, which property it was in? And the one, whoever's property it was in, he's going to be the one that's going to win, because we'll say that it has a chazaka. There's a chazaka, an assumed status
where he was pulling
wherever the property was. You're trying to extract it from the other person.
Property?
Or
object.
in whosever's property it was.
And it was on the street.
My answers, I'm Rabchia, Barav and I'm Shmuel by Medes Bagam. It's in the meadow that no one owns it. So we were thinking that maybe we would say, well, and who's the one that's extracting it from the other person? So whoever that party has to bring the proof. We say, well, it was in a ownerless land. The Gemara now says, and when we're talking about the maidservant, we're talking about that she's standing on the side of the road.
There's a difference inside the road or public.
No, it's the same thing. Well, what about if it would be a public property? You can't do a mashicha in the public property, but maybe you can acquire it there, or maybe not. Maybe it needs to be acquired in a place where the kinyan could be made. I'm not sure. That's an interesting point. If the person himself would be pulling the cow, you can't pull it in a public property. You need to pull it on the side, right? Simta. It has to be on the or tzidi or shasarabim or simta. That's where. Yeah, for Shabbos we call maybe a karmelis, but that's the Shabbos laws.
Why can't
Gonna
you
use that.
something?
I think the kinyan to show
What do you mean? If
ownership.
I'm two people in the middle of the street, I says, here's my, you can buy my pencil, yeah. But, he gives me the pencil, I'll do shikha in public, I can't buy it.
Things hagbah you can do anywhere. I think. Mashicha, I thought it would only have to be on the side. Do you remember, Naftali?
Oh, the pencil, that's not like livestock.
You had to pull it on the side. Okay, whatever the case is. V'nukmei, the Gemara asks, v'nukmei acheskas t'marakam of lavi the chametz mechaver levaraya. Why don't we say that there was a prior owner? So whoever was the original owner, he should be the one that has the chazaka. Chazaka means assumed status. It should really belong to him. Now the person that's the purchaser, he's the one that's extracting it. You're trying to take the bigger one. You have to bring a proof. My answer is we don't do that. Sumchas, the student of Reb Meir, Sumchas, he holds that when we have questions like this, we don't put it on its assumed status. Instead, we divide it. We just split it in half. Where it says, you see, the case that we had with Sumchas was a case where someone purchased the cow or exchanged the cow, and it was born, and each one is claiming the original case is each one is saying that it was born at the time that it was mine, but no one knows for sure. So that was a case of Shema b'Shemesh. Each one is a maybe, perhaps. You have a question?
If you're comparing a maidservant to a cow, right?
Yeah.
The maidservant can talk.
Yeah, but maidservant wasn't involved in the transaction.
She could say
They're
what
comparing.
time it happened. She could say it
She wasn't
happened
even
before
there.
I saw. She first she was there.
Oh, but she doesn't know when the what's it
Correct,
called?
they could say. They both know. They could say it happened at the
They're
start.
different transactions.
Yeah, Shalom and David are asking that the maidservant maybe knows when she gave birth, the exact time for the birth certificate, and then they know exactly what time they did this, and they could figure it out. I guess we're talking about when we don't have that information. They had clocks that were approximately like within a few hours.
Ish.
Proximity.
Even if they had the time, the testimony be accounted for, that she cannot deal with it.
It could be. Sometimes we trust someone Mesiach Lafituma, maybe, but I know we do that for other things. Sometimes we trust that. I don't know. So does Sumcha say his halacha that we'll divide it in half, even bebari, even when both are definite, have a definite claim? Well, Amar Rabbi Baravuna says, this is Ravuna's son Rabba. He says, yes, Amar Sumcha Shafila bebari. So in the Mishnah, we have a case at the beginning where there's a bari. Bari means definite. We have a case where there's a shema. That's the last case of the Mishnah. Case number 1, case number 5 would be one bari and one shema. One case of bari and one case of shema
When
and
it
shema.
comes to dividing a person or animal, one person keeps the animal and takes
Gets
that
the body,
value.
yeah.
You know?
You should have known from the story, take a sword.
Yeah.
Rava Amar Leilam Kiamar Samchas Shema v'Shema. Really, Rava says Samchas was really talking about only in a case where they're both maybes. Aval Bari Layamar, but he doesn't say it by a Bari. And so, what are we going to do with our Mishnah, where each one is claiming something? We're going to readjust the Mishnah. We're going to edit it. We're going to add in the word Ze'omer Shema. Each one is saying, perhaps it was when I sold it. Perhaps it was before it was after I bought it, or before I sold it. Okay. So in the Mishnah, back in the Mishnah, case number 1, maybe is a maybe, and maybe it's a definite. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah. Last case of the Mishnah, case number 5, and each one doesn't know when it happened, or if it was the bigger one or the smaller one. So we say Yachlaiku. Bishleim Rava, when it came to Rava, that says that Sumchas only says is din by a maybe. So then Midaseifa Shema v'Shema Rishanami v'Shema v'Shema. So the last case is a maybe, and the first case is a maybe. Sounds good. Elal Rava Baravuna Damar in Amar Sumchas Vila Bari. That Sumchas says that even if it's definite, Hashta Bari Amar Yachlaiku Shema v'Shema Mibai. If we say when it's definite, we say Yachlaiku. And case number 1, we already got the biggest chiddush. Why do we need case number 5, which tells me a lesser chiddush? That tells me Shema v'Shema, that maybe I know, right? For sure, he would say that. No, I'm not sure what the logic is to actually differentiate. I know the original case of Sumchas was Shema v'Shema. What is the actual logic to say that when I have a doubt, I divide it more if there's a doubt, if they also don't know? So if they're both claiming definite, why is that? Maybe because if they're both definite, maybe I should insert a shvua somewhere, or something, because they can swear. But if they have a doubt, then there's nothing to swear about. They don't know. Maybe there's something like that. Is there a comment in there that?
There's a lot of links.
Possible same way.
Gives you.
An uncertain claim weakens the position of the one in possession of the contested property. Cheskas Mammon is weak. Gemara is suggesting that Sumchus agrees with that reasoning, and that it is indeed an essential component of his approach, even against a prior owner, where the claim of the person in possession contested property, or the prior owner says, however, then his possession status is unassailable, even in the case of inherent doubt, which is as famous. They're not really telling me what there's some deeper stuff in this. Some deeper stuff that why it's more logical for Sumchas to say Yachlaiku when it's a Shema v'Shema. Okay, so the Gemara says that if we know it by Bari and Bari, so then why do we need to say it by Shema v'Shema? Gemara says Yimishum Ha. If that's your whole problem, light area, then don't grab onto that. That's not a big enough issue. That's Tana Seifa L'Gli Reisha. The reason why it says it in the Seifa is that in the last case of the Mishnah, case number 5, is just to reveal what the first case of the Mishnah is referring to. I could have thought, if I didn't have the last case, I would have thought that the first case of the Mishnah is a Shema v'Shema also. But if it would be a Bari, if it would be a definite, then we wouldn't say that. So Tana Seifa Shema v'Shema. So therefore, the last case, we say clearly Shema v'Shema Mechlal Dereisha Bari. That's just to reveal that the first case was a different case, that it was Bari. Vafilu Hafi Yachlaiku, and nevertheless it's Yachlaiku. So if I have 2 cases, one of them is going to be a Bari. If I only had 1 case, I would have translated that case to be a Shema v'Shema. A maybe, and a maybe.
But Shema and Bari is the same outcome.
Now it's the same outcome, but I wouldn't have known that. I would have thought, if I would have only had 1 case, I would have translated that case to be Shema v'Shema. Now that I have 2 cases, so one of them is Bari, one is Shema v'Shema. The Gemara was asking, that why do you need two cases? If once it's bari, then you're all set. Shema v'shema for sure would be yachlaiku.
As long as both are the same.
Right,
Both.
right. So the Gemara is answering that. The Gemara is saying that if it would have only had one case, I would have thought that that case is a shema v'shema. Even though once you tell me bari, I don't need to. You don't need to tell me shema v'shema. But if it would
Because
have
they
only
were
said
saying
one,
the case without Bari or Shema Shema. We're assuming that.
yeah.
So if you would have only had one, you would have just naturally assumed the
That-
Shema.
Okay. Right. And it was taught in the Mishnah. That's what we're holding, right? Zemer gadol v'zemer katan. This one says, I bought the big one. This one says, you bought the small one. So the seller swears. Seller swears that he sold them the smaller one. Now we're understanding over here that it's a. I'm sorry.
So it's both, they were both Bari.
Yeah, and it's but he's a ma'adim b'miktzas. That's
Right.
that's the way we're in.
Right.
Bishleim Rava, according to Rava Kiyam or Simcha Shema v'Shema. That's our Mishnah Simchas, right? So if when there's a Shema v'Shema, so Simcha says Yachlaiku Aval Bari La Yamar, but when it's Bari, he doesn't say Yachlaiku. Yishamachi Yishava. That's why this is not a case that Simchas would step in and say just split it in half. El Rab Baravuna Damar in Amar Simchas Fila Bari, but according to Rab Baravuna, that says that Simchas says is din over here as well. Ma Yishava Meicher. Why does the seller swear? Yachlaikum mi baile. You should be just dividing it in half. My answer is made the Simchas echadika shva deraisa kedibin lameim lakamad. Simchas agrees if it's a ma'adim b'miktzas that we're going to do a ma'adim b'miktzas shvua. It was only when it wasn't a ma'adim b'miktzas where Simchas just says to divide it. Simchas is not saying that we don't do shvuas when there's a real shvua deraisa. As the Gemara is going to need to explain further on, how is this a real ma'adim b'miktzas? The Gemara coming up. Okay. So the Gemara said, the Mishnah said, if you had two slaves, one was an adult and one was a minor. And so the seller is saying, I sold you the minor, and the purchaser is saying, I bought the adult. So the rule is that the seller takes an oath that he sold the minor, and then that's all he has to give. So Gemara asks, Ama Yishava, why should he have to take an oath? Mashatanu, what the purchaser is claiming from him, like he doesn't admit to. Masha what he's admitting to, like Tanu, he never asked for. When do we say ma'adim b'miktas if you're a partial admittance? That's if the person's claiming $100. And the guy's saying, I agreed to 50. But over here, he's claiming the adult slave, and the guy's saying, I'll give you I sold to you only the minor slave, which is not the same. It's not half of the adult, right? It's not half of the adult. It's a different thing. Yeah.
You're talking about a mother and a child and a baby.
Now we
that's still in
switched.
their- in their
Now
belly?
we switched to two slaves. One of them, they're both for sale. He bought one of them. Which one did he purchase?
Is it still in her?
No.
Oh, okay.
But it wouldn't be considered because they're like different prices, I guess. And he's admitting that he purchased one.
Right.
It's just
Right, but so far we're not talking about value here. We're talking about the person, the slave himself. He's saying in the value, it's a ma'adim b'miktzas. That's true, but he's not claiming the value. It's right now. We'll see in the Gemara in a moment. There's another issue here. Heilachu. The slave is standing right here. He's telling him, take the small one. Now we had a rule with ma'adim b'miktzas that if a person claims, you owe me $100, another one says, here's 50. The other 50, I don't owe you at all. So what happens is it restarts the whole claim, and it's not considered a ma'adim b'miktzas. It's not a partial admittance because he already gave him that it's a full denial of the 50 that they're discussing. So over here, even if you want to say that this is a ma'adim b'miktzas, partial admittance, but the fact is he's giving him the younger slave, and the other half of the slave, the adult half of the slave, the mature part, is full denial. And then there's another issue, a third issue of einishpan al avadim. We have a rule that you don't take an oath about a slave. You don't take an oath over land, or of a slave, or of a document. Okay. Amarav, so Rav answers all of the questions. B'tayna Dmei Eved.
It's about the money.
Dmei Eved Gadol. B'tayna Dmei. Dmei Eved Gadol, Dmei Eved Katan. Dmei Sadik Gedayla. Dmei Sadik Katana. So we're talking about over here where he purchased the slave, but the guy never gave it to him. So he's saying, give me my money back. So the guy's saying, okay, you paid for the bigger one or you paid for the smaller one? He says, I think you pay, I'm definite that you paid for the smaller one. So he's ready to give him the $50. And the guy says, no, I bought the big one and I want the $100.
And no, there is no receipt.
Right.
No Zell either.
What is a shavua when somebody is a shema? Is he saying, I swear that I don't know? Is
Yeah,
that-
we usually don't have a shua on a shema.
Yeah.
All this is cases of bari.
Yeah, okay.
He has to claim. He's claiming that no, it was the bigger one. It was the smaller one that you purchased. So therefore, I only owe you $50. That's Rav's answer. Shmuel says, "B'tayina ksus eved gadol, ksus eved katan, omer sadik gadol, omer sadik katan." Shmuel says that no, he's maybe he bought it together with the garment. So he's resolving the issue of that you don't swear on slaves. The oath is not really on the slave. The oath is really on the garment of the slave. And when he bought the field, which you don't swear on the field either, he's talking about the bundles that were in the field. I bought the bundles, all the bundles of the large field. I bought all the bundles of the small field. So the Gemara says, 1 second. So when it comes to the garment, how are you telling me? You only answered one of the questions. You answered the question that it's not swearing about a slave. You're swearing about a garment, which that's acceptable. But what about the other two questions, the halech and mashatanu le'haidalei, that they're talking about two different things. So ksus mashatanu le'haidalei, mashahaidalei le'tanu. What about the fact that if you're claiming the larger garment, so and the person's admitting that he owes you the smaller garment, so that's not the same garment. It's not a partial admittance. We're talking about a garment. Rav Papa answers this b'diyalfi, achnam b'diyalfi. I don't have the exact word for b'diyalfi. I tried looking it up this morning in the gesture. I couldn't find it. Oh, maybe because I should have adjusted it. The Bach has a Beis Daled Lamed Yud. I was putting the Yud before the Lamed. That's why I couldn't find it. What I think it is that it's a large garment that was made by probably like some sort of, they would wrap it around you, and so you could cut it wherever it is. So when he admits to part of it, so it's actually admitting to part of the same garment. That's how do they translate in the English?
It's several pieces of cloth that were attached to make one.
Oh, several pieces of cloth attached to make one. So then when he's admitting to the smaller one, so he's actually admitting to part of the same garment. This would be like those, I have a raincoat that you put the lining and you can zipper it in. So if you want it to be a winter coat, you can take the lining out, that's the zipper and the lining. So it's be something like that. This guy's claiming a thick coat, and he's saying a raincoat. It's probably like a zipper on the hem. You can make it another foot or two. Yeah. Okay. So how did we answer this? We answered that it's not talking about property. It's not talking about a slave. It's not talking about property. It's talking about the clothing. Okay, so you're allowed to swear about clothing. We also said that it's not mashatanu le'haidalei because it's the same garment. Is it all the pieces of the garment, or is it only some of them? And the person's admitting to some of them. What about halech? What about halech? I guess it's not right here. He's admitting to it, and he has to go get it for him or something. Okay, Kashlei Rabbi Shia. Rabbi Shia has a question on this answer that we just got from Shmuel. It says, Midik Susktani, does it say that he was buying from him the garment? It says Eved Kani was buying from him the slave. Who made up this thing about that the whole thing is a garment? Elam Rabbaishia.
Find the shoes of it. The slave was in it.
That's more important.
Yeah.
The old Jewish joke with the president of the shul was in a Schaefer restaurant. The rabbi's watching from the window. They bring out this pig. The rabbi like comes in. He said, "What is going on?" So he says, "I don't know. I ordered an apple. You know, they have the pig with the apple in it. I ordered an apple, and this is what they said." So really it was a slave with the with his garment in the field with it. So what we're going to say over here now is that even though they're arguing about the slave as well, which that was our whole problem, you can't swear on a slave, but you are able to swear on a slave if it's a Gilgal Shvua. Gilgal Shvua means that you had an original Shvua that was acceptable, and then we're going to tag along another oath that we would never have done initially, but because you're making an oath anyway, we can attach it on. So what Rabbi Shia is saying is that he's able to swear about the garment because that's what they're arguing about also. So once he swears about the garment, he can tag along also the oath about the slave.
I want to get another bill passed.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, we learned from Saita. Yeah. And the same would apply with the field. We don't swear on property.
So it's like Gilgal.
Gilgal.
Would that be considered a moed b'mitzvah because there's partial claims to one
Yeah,
item?
the
If you
mi-
combine both.
There's a Metzia Daf on the garment itself. That's already a Metzia Daf. That's why he has to take an oath, because he's claiming part of the garment. He's claiming that the guy's claiming the whole garment. He's admitting to part of the garment. So now he has to take an oath. So you say, oh, you are swearing on the garment. Okay, now swear about which slave it was also.
Okay.
And the same thing with the field. He is admitting to some of the bundles of the field. So you're going to swear about some of the ones that you're denying. Made the miktas, now swear about the field. We go back to the same question, and Rav Papa answers that we're dealing with that type of garment where it comes apart. You know, he's admitting to some of it, and the other part he's denying. Rav Sheshis has a question on this. You're coming to tell me that you can take one oath and tag along this other oath that usually you wouldn't do? Tanina, that I have a Mishnah that clearly says that. If someone has to take an oath about personality, which that's acceptable, so we can tag along with that. Also an oath on realty, which that you would never do initially. But I have a Mishnah. So our Mishnah is coming to tell me what I learned clearly in another Mishnah. Alama Rav Sheshis has an answer, totally different answer. Amani Rav Meiri. This is the opinion of Rav Meir. The Amar Avda Kimetaltlin Dami. We said that you don't take an oath on realty, and we also don't take an oath on about slaves, because slaves are compared to realty. This is the opinion of Rav Meir, who says that slaves are not compared to realty. Slaves are compared to personality, and you're allowed to take an oath on slaves. So you don't have to get into this whole discussion about the garment, and the garment you tag along this. It's taking an oath about the slave. Exactly. But that doesn't mean that you can't take an oath on it. I forget how they learned out you can't take an oath. It was from some klal or prat klal or something. There was some lima. The question is if you apply the slaves into that as well. It was in Gittin. We had it. Akati, but 1 second, but you didn't answer the full question, because if you're dealing with the slave, then he's admitting to the younger slave and denying the older one. That's not a moed b'mitzvah. That's not a partial admittance. what he's claiming, he's denying 100%, and what he's admitting to, the person never claimed. So the Gemara answers that. Savala Ram Gamliel, he's passing like Ram Gamliel, Damartano Chitam, I'd Lebesayim Pater, Ram Gamliel Machaya. That there is a machlekes. If someone is claiming from one person wheat, another one says, I don't owe you wheat, I owe you barley. 50% of what you're claiming. But it's not wheat, it's barley. Ram Gamliel says that's a maida b'miktzas. So if that's the case, then we can do the same thing over here with the slave. He's claiming the older slave, and the guy's saying, I admit to the younger slave. The Gemara says, Akati helachu. What about helach? Because the slave is wherever he is, he's considered yours, and so it's basically just becomes yours. So that's not, you lose the maida b'miktzas. Amar Rava avda dekata liyade v'sada shechafer b'bayis sichan amayras. Talking about over here that the slave is not the original slave because his hand got cut off, and the field is not the original field because he dug pits into it. So he's not really telling him here it is. He has to still owe money along with it.
Which has to pay
So
for
this
his
is a
hand.
very complex
He has
answer
to pay him back for his arm, for the value of his arm.
for that value because it's not the original. So basically, what we just did was we're following the opinion of Reb Meir that says you're allowed to swear about slaves. We're following the opinion of Ram Gamliel that says Maida b'miktzas applies even if it's not the original thing that's being claimed. And it's also the slave is not the original slave because his hand got cut off. Okay.
So like if you're selling a car,
It's missing a
you
wheel.
sell it. Next day, you sell it, can I use it one more day? Crash it. You have to sell it at the original. I mean, you have to damage it, you have to
This is
give them a
true.
deal,
Right.
a better deal.
As a borrower, you would have to fix it.
And I wasn't sure if he finished the
You can
purchase or
agree
he
to sell
didn't.
something instead, and like with a house, you can agree to like rent the house for a couple of months.
Right.
After
Then you become a borrower.
buy it.
Then you become a borrower. Then you have a different responsibility. If the sale is
So
done,
it's not.
then you would become a borrower. Yeah. Okay. So the Gemara says, okay, you're telling me that this is the opinion of Reb Meir, that Reb Meir holds that a slave is like personality and not like realty, and you're allowed to take the oath. Problem is, we have exactly the opposite statement from Reb Meir. Ditnan, started in the Mishnah. Gosel beim viskina, if someone stole an animal and it aged. Avadim viskino, slaves and they aged. Shalom Chasak Zela, he has to pay what they were at the time when he stole them, the original price, the original value when he stole them. Meir says, by the slave, he can say, here's the slave, even though it's old. Now, why can he do that? Because slave is considered like property. And by property, we say that if someone steals a property from someone else, we say that it's never really stolen. Because he never really removed it. He never took it anywhere. It was yours. You were just a squatter, but it was still that person's the whole time. So the payment for it there was never really a time where there was a price attached to it, that now is the time that you have to pay for it. It was always that person's. You weren't supposed to be in it. The same thing with the slave. The slave always belonged to the original owner. You were just not supposed to be holding on to it. Okay, so now you say, okay, I'm not holding on to it anymore, even though now it's an old slave already. So Reb Meir says that slaves are compared to property, and that's why you're allowed to give it back. 1 second, you told me Reb Meir says slaves are not compared to property. My answer is Halikasha. This is not a big problem because Kedemachlef Rabba Baravua, way Rabba Baravua switched it around. V'tani Reb Meir Misham Chasik Zil mainly Rabba Baravua just changed the names. This reminds me of the kids that do the Rubik's Cube, but they take the pieces out and switch them. That's not fair. Okay, it's funny because Rabba Baravua does the same thing we had a machlekes about a seicher, if he's a machlekes Ramein Rabbi Yehuda, he's a shemechinam or a shemer. And whenever we got into trouble with that, Rabba Baravua just switched it. He said, no, Rameir holds the other way. So Rabba Baravua does the same thing over here with Rameir. Yeah. Okay. It's different versions of the argument. 1 second. you know what's going to come out over here? You only answered the question about the slave, that the slave is not compared to the property. But the problem is you left out one case. You left out a case that one of the cases over here was the person says, I sold you the big field. And he says the small field. The guy says, no, I bought the big field. The guy says, I sold you the small field. And big slave, small slave. And so Rameir says, oh, slaves aren't like realty. 1 second, what about the realty? Yeah, that was one of the cases. How did you take an oath about that? So what we're going to say is, the way we're going to answer that is that just like Rameir holds that a slave you're allowed to take an oath on, so to the realty you're allowed to take an oath on. So it says, Mimai, where do you see the Savar Rameir Makshin Karkalevet? How do you know that you compare the realty to the slave? Maybe there's no comparison. Maybe by the slave you're allowed to swear because the slave is compared to personality. But realty, Reb Meir holds that you're not allowed to swear, and then it leaves us with the problem. It says, don't think like that. The tiny, because we have a brisa, someone exchanged the cow for a donkey, and the cow gave birth. Or someone that's sold a maidservant and the maidservant gave birth. This one says it gave birth in my property, and the other one's quiet. This one says, I'm sorry, I skipped the halacha. The one that said that claimed it, the one that's definite, he's the one that acquires it. But if this one says I don't know, then the halacha is yachlaiku. Both are definite. Then he has to swear. Why does he have to swear? Because Rameir says that whoever swears is always the which one has to swear? The one that is denying the payment, not the one that's claiming. The defendant. The defendant swears. That's because that's how he should. Okay. Now there's an emphasis here in this Gemara, in this brisa, that the Chachamim say you can't swear about slaves. And then they add in or about property. Why they add in or about property? Probably because Rameir holds that you do swear about property and you do swear about slaves. They weren't discussing property, they weren't discussing slaves or animals. Now, regarding the animal, the Chacham would agree that they can take an oath, but regarding the slave, they said you can't take an oath. And then he adds in, or we also can't swear about property. It must mean that Rameir holds that you do swear on property, and they're throwing in an old machlekes over here if we swear on property and realty. It says, Mimai. How do you know that that's the actual proof that Rameir argues with them about this? Dilmak shame ka'amrlei. They're saying just like the same way you agree that you can't swear on realty, you should also agree that you can't swear on slaves. Not that the mayor also argues with them. In other words, the fact that they threw that in was not because there's a machlekes between the mayor and the chachamim if you can swear on realty. No, everyone agrees. What happened?
Big sale.
Flash sale. In Shasbad, save $700.
How much is the Shasbad?
They probably increased it $700.
How much is it? What is it?
I don't know. I think it's 1,000. When I bought it, it was like $500-600.
Oh.
But they have the option. I mine from before. They sell you the digital books.
Oh.
It comes out cheaper.
How much you paying each time?
No, you buy the whole thing.
Yeah, but
He didn't buy the pad.
You wait.
He didn't get a new iPad. He used his old
but
iPad.
you bought the whole shot.
You just
Did
find
you
stuff
buy
for
all
you.
shots? How much you charge?
No, it's fire. It doesn't have the art scroll.
What?
on sale.
So he paid $800 to download it to his computer. They gave me a brand new iPad with it at the time for $500. So they're charging $1,000 or they're running a $500.
Yeah. Okay, the Dr. Stein came and is telling us there's a sale on the Shasbad.
He takes 5%.
I don't understand why is this slave compared to
You have to buy
Don't you make
that.
it Kenyan differently?
Actually, no. Actually, the Kenyan is
Yeah,
very
the
similar.
middle guy.
With
You
the
just
slave
have to
and
make
the-
a change or walk around.
Yeah, and the same thing.
The slave
Well,
should-
the property is purchased with money, documents, or a chazaka showing ownership. Slave is also purchased with the money, a document, and showing ownership. You work the slave.
showing
You know, polish my shoes. Okay, so now what the Gemara is saying is that maybe really Reb Meir doesn't hold that you're allowed to take an oath about over realty. The claim that we had over here that the Chum say that you're allowed to swear, that you're not allowed to swear on realty, and he's arguing with Reb Meir, that's just trying to prove their point. Say just like you can't swear on realty, you also can't swear on slaves, which Reb Meir held that you could, but not that they're arguing about the realty. Teda, I'll prove it to you. It's not. We're going to prove that Reb Meir agrees that you can't swear on property. There's certain things that are like realty, but are also not like realty. And the sages don't agree. Kate said, what's the case? You'd give on him tunis musartilach. I gave you 10 vines that have loaded with grapes. Another one says, oh no, there were only 5. Reb Meir says that you can take an oath. The sages say that anything that's attached to the ground is considered the ground. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina explained this. That the difference is between the what is the machlekes? Machlekes is if they're ready to be harvested. Right. Where Marsavar kibitzuris damin. Rabbi Meir says that they're not considered harvested. Marsavar lav kibitzuris damin. And the Chacham say no, they're considered attached to the ground. That's why you can't take an oath. Which means that everyone holds that if it is attached to the ground, that you're not allowed. If it is or the real ground, that you're not allowed to take an oath. It means your mayor holds also you're not allowed to take an oath. So how are you going to resolve half the Mishnah? We're going to go back and we're going to answer like Rabbi Shia. That Rabbi Shia said that we're dealing with the clothes of the Eved together with the Eved, and the Kashlach Zaykin. Or if it's the bundles of the grain that he's denying half of them or whatever. We said that once you take one oath, you can tag along the second oath. I the kashlach zaykikin. You had a question. You're trying to tell me zaykikin. It's necessary. I mean, I could have said I could have said that when you're buying the eved. Now you're saying that you have to take an oath because it was wearing clothing, that you're denying the longer clothing and you're admitting to the smaller clothing. I could have thought that the clothing is so bottled to the Eved that it's not considered an independent oath, that you should be able to swear. I would say it's all Eved, it's all slave. And I could have said that the bundles of wheat are considered the field. They're bottled to the realty. So Kamash Malana comes to tell me that no, it's an original. It's each thing is independent, and that I would take an oath just on the clothing of the Eved, and then I can tag along. We had a question. It's coming to tell me that you do Gilgal Shua, that you can tag along another oath once you have one. I'm saying, yeah, this is a chiddush because I could have thought that maybe it's not an independent oath.
It goes against the Mashal and Tanya holding the king by all his multiple garments. It's like holding the king himself. This goes against that. You don't separate the garments.
Like the Stein is asking me from Tanya, it says about when you do a mitzvah, it says you're hugging the king, and it doesn't matter if he's wearing one garment or many garments. And now it's saying that that the garments are independent. Okay.
What's the answer? The question? Well, I don't know.
They see the whole thing is it's the question is not the same.
The answer is that there's a conflict over the garment as well. They're arguing over which garment, which king and which garment.
Has Achashverosh in the garment, the other one has, they.
I like your garment.
Okay. Let's go further. This one says I don't know. This one says I don't know. So yachlaiku, right? Each one doesn't know if it was the bigger one or the smaller one. The halacha is that you divide it up according to sumchas. Amani, whose opinion is this? Sumchasi, this is the opinion of Sumchas Damar. Sumchas holds, Maman Amatul Besafik is chalkin, that you divide anytime there's a doubt. Aim Seifa, let's go further. This one says it was in my property, and this one says in my property. It was in my, in other words, when the this is coming up. Where is this?
But you gave birth.
When she gave birth, yeah. It was after I purchased it, before I purchased. So but there it says that the seller swears that it was in his property. And then he doesn't have to give it. Why should the swear? It should really be just a division, according to Rabba Bar Huna, that holds that Sumchas holds the same thing even when they're definite claims. My answer is, the Sumchas Eichedikish for their rice of the Kata Liyada Kidarava. That talking about over here, where it's a Maida B'Miktas, it's Halach. The answer is that the hand was cut off, like Rabbi answered before, that it's not a din of Halach. Halach means here it is, because it's not the original evidence. Okay, it's a new Mishnah. Amaycher Zeisav Leitzim, Vasa Pachas Meravius Lasa, Ariel Shabala Zeisim. Here we have a landowner and the purchaser, and the landowner has the property, and he has trees in the property, and he sells some of the trees for the wood. Now, the person, instead of cutting down the trees, left the trees there, and the trees started to produce fruit in this guy's field. So if it produces very little, it's olive trees over here. So the guy's cutting it down for the olive wood, but it produced a few olives. That's not enough to make a revius of oil for one saw of olives. So they're not great olives, and they can't get a revius of oil out of it. So Hariel Shabala Zeisim belongs to the person that purchased the wood. Also revius lasa, but if the olives are good olives, Zemer Zeisi Gadla, this one's claiming my trees. Zemer Zeisi Gadla, it says my field. So then Yachlaiku, you have to divide it. Yeah, the nutrients are coming from the trees and from the field. The nutrients from the ground. The nutrients from the photosynthesis, right, from the leaves. Right? It's different minerals that they're getting from the ground and from the. You agree, Doctor?
I'm just wondering about the guy whose wife owns the trees. He's allowed to eat the payros. Why he should only, in this case, according to this opinion,
That should
should
cover
only be allowed it.
His wife owns, no.
He gets the payros of her stuff.
Of her.
But if he or someone
No,
gets
over there, she owned the field and the trees.
right,
So he gets to eat all the
but
payros.
he
Yeah.
bought the trees.
Yeah, this guy, one person owns the trees, one person owns the property. So the nutrients come from different parts. They divide it.
Wait. The guy who owns the trees now?
There's a purchaser that owns trees.
Oh, so the question is the fruit on those trees.
Yeah. Now, not necessarily is this because the nutrients are coming. It could be just if you have a suffix in Yachlaiko. It doesn't have to do it. So it could be because of the doubt. Okay.
Wait. So if you have a doubt, then you make a barakri agama, which covers the eights, right? No. The owner of the field has went up, trumps the tree.
If a river washed away the trees, and it replanted it somewhere else, all right? The river overflowed and it knocked off the trees from this property and it replanted it somewhere else. This one says, those are my trees. I need the fruits that grew on it. This one says, maybe your trees, but it's my land that produced the fruit. So it's Yachlaiko, they divide it up. What's the case when the person sold the trees and the guy left them there? If he told him, I want you to remove them immediately, then the owner of the land should really get, even if it's less than even if they're bad olives and they don't produce so much inferior quality, he should also get it. He wasn't supposed to leave them there. He should take all the fruits from it. If he told him, I don't care when you cut it down, whenever you want. Then he knows that it's going to grow olives and it's going to belong to him. The Gemara says, he told him, he didn't give him anything, any information about when he needs to cut it. If it only produces less than Revius, like Kapti Inchi, then a person isn't so makbid, isn't so particular. And you let that pass. Revius, but once it produces a Revius of olive, of oil, then Kapti Inchi, then the owner would have been particular about that, and he wouldn't allow it, and therefore it would have to divide it.
Wouldn't just pay the value of even the not so good olives, just whatever.
We're claiming that he would Michael, whatever is
Not
attached to the
significant
cheese.
anyway.
It mentions that he told the new owner to like cut down the trees for wood.
Right.
So like that doesn't go into like the math. Like for wood, he would have gotten, let's say, $100, but now he got 1,000 out of all these olives. They discount the 100 or
The wood would have been $100, right?
and, yeah.
He paid $100 for it, but he left it in the field and it's starting to grow. So now they're arguing over the olives,
But the purchaser is really the owner now.
right?
Like he just
But it's his field, but it's the other guy's field.
so he wouldn't have to pay for
Selling the field.
Right.
Only selling.
the wood. So he wouldn't have to pay for the wood.
He bought the wood, but he didn't take his trees, and it's growing olives. So they split it because he didn't tell him when to cut it down. It wasn't clear. So when it's not clear, then we do. How much he would be Michael? Would he be Michael or not Michael? Would he forgo on that
Like our olives have much like this tree
into the
in the
ground?
ground. They can't have a tree.
It also takes
Can't have a
time,
land, but,
You would have to wait like 4 years to be able to get all of it.
What do you mean?
The first 3 years now. Before
The trees are big trees.
Yeah, but that takes time. This person, the first owner had invested all this time to the trees.
No. 1 second. He bought what? He bought the trees. The trees are big trees. He didn't cut it down, and grew olives. There's no problem with those olives. It's old trees. They're 100 years old. I'm Reb Shimon ben Pazi. There is a discussion in this Gemara about 3 years, but that doesn't have to do with this. I'm Reb Shimon ben Pazi. Reb Shimon ben Pazi says, "Reviya shamru chutz min haitzah." You have to also subtract one more detail over here, and that is that the work to take out the olive oil, but you need a centrifuge to get the press, and then you have to separate. All you get is the juice. You have to separate the oil from the thing. In those days, it's a lot of spinning around. So that's a big effort. So you have to subtract that as well, and then see if it's really getting you a revius of olive oil. Okay. The next case was Shatif Narzesav. If the trees get washed off and they end up getting replanted somewhere else. Now over here, there's a discussion about waiting the 3 years of Arla because they were uprooted and now they're replanted. So that's a discussion. Well, Amar Ula, Amar Reish Lakish. Ula says in the name of Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish is a sage in Eretz Yisrael, and Ula is a traveler. So he brings halachas from Eretz Yisrael. We'll see. Ula is going to bring it, and then Ravin is going to bring it. Ravin was a later traveler. Amar Ula, Amar Reish Lakish leishanol shenekru b'gushem. We're talking about over here, comfy. We're talking about over here that okay,
Yeah.
that when the trees get uprooted, they got uprooted. You know how they move the palm trees, to the side of the road. They have like a
Big
bag.
bulb, yeah, around it.
What's it called? A bulb.
I don't know the name.
They put
When they
like
cover
a
it.
big bag under it
Right.
to hold all the dirt in it,
Yeah.
and then they put it in.
Like a
Now,
bulb.
can it have lived with that dirt? So if it can
For a certain
continue to live with that dirt, that it's enough dirt that it's not going to dry up and die. So then it's not considered like it's restarting the time for Arla. It's considered like if you could live in that dirt, then that's good.
Living it dirt for a certain amount of
Yeah, I'm not sure
Not
exactly how long.
Well,
I'm not sure how long, but as long as it's considered like enough dirt that it could survive, so then fine. So we're talking about over here, when the river came along and uprooted it, it took it together with the dirt that was under it. And we're talking about that they're discussing now after 3 years, after it got replanted. But if it's within the 3 years, then of course it's going to belong to the first owner. Why? Because because he could tell to this second owner, he can say, if you would have planted your own trees, you wouldn't have a cent. You wouldn't have any of these olives. Now you took my trees because they got washed up. And now, so our discussion about dividing the olives, that's only after 3 years, but the first 3 years, it's for sure mine. You don't get anything for the first 3 years.
your claim doesn't hold water.
Your claim doesn't hold water. Okay. Malay, let the new owner say, let the new host say, 1 second. If I would have planted it, then I would be getting everything after 3 years. What are you doing over here getting half? You're claiming that it's like if I would have planted on my own, then I would have planted, I would have everything. Now you're taking half of it. Ella, rather, Rabin switches the way this was said, and it goes like this. We're talking about it came with the dirt, but we're talking about the argument is within the first 3 years. But after 3 years, everything should belong to the new owner. Because he can say to him, if I would have planted it, after 3 years, I would have eaten everything. So the whole argument of it is only within the first 3 years. But let the original owner say, but if you would have planted, you wouldn't gotten anything for the first 3 years, and now you're taking half. It says Mishum Damalei, if I would have planted it, then they would have been very small, these olive trees, and I would have been able to plant other things right around it. And I would have been able to plant vegetables. Now that they're big, there's no light coming in, so that's why I lost out from if I would have planted it on my own. Now, it's not 100% clear to me who owns these trees. Is the guy paying him? Is the guy going to pay him for the trees? What's happening? You going?
I was safe.
Don't worry, Shalom's here.
Does it say over there who if he has to pay for the trees, or if he has to if the guy wants his trees back? What's going on exactly? I know there's olives popping out. I'll hope to get to the end of the Amud. It goes to the top of the next Amud. Number 5. The neighbor can argue that immediately after the flood, he could have purchased and planted in with 3 years from it. The fact that he's leaving these trees means that he's agreeing that the other person should get some of them. Since this clearly was the neighbor's intent, and since the owner nonetheless chose not to retrieve his trees, we can presume that the tree's owner indeed agreed to divide the produce of the first 3 years. Okay.
Basically, like let the first owner, let him keep half his paying rent,
Maybe.
for the land.
Yeah. Sort of like he's agreeing. It's as if they're agreeing to divide the produce when he leaves the trees there. Okay.
I don't quite understand why he has a claim.
The fruits? Who, the original owner, or the original owner says those are my trees. Not selling them.
Oh.
The river washed them down. They
Okay.
started growing somewhere in someone else's field. So those are my trees, those are my fruits. And the guy's saying that look, it's my field, and if they should be my fruits because they're growing in my field. I could have planted trees also. Your trees showed up over here. You know, I'm growing your trees instead of my trees.
similar to the squatter, the person that doesn't use the net.
Right.
The house.
As we're listening to this, it seems to me that the ideas of late Euclico, that they should divide, it seems to apply more when the quality of their claims are equal, rather than just, it's a Shema and a Shema, or a Bari and a Bari. Because here, this is a mind-bending, case.
Now, is this clearly a din of Sumchas when he says Yachlaiku? Or is this a Yachlaiku because they become like partial owners, partial investors?
Well, and then you
Is
end
this
up in the
itself-
same place, don't you?
I understand, but is this a suffix Yachlaiku or is this a Yachlaiku because, in other words, would anyone argue on this?
Well, here you're not arguing about what happened. You're arguing about the legality of what happened, right?
Right.
Is this sugya we've been learning today the main discussion in the Talmud about Shavuos?
About oaths about
Yeah.
property? No, I think that's in Gittin, I think.
Getting, okay.
At least there's a big sugi there about it. Sounds like a partnership here, which is that's not a din in Sumchas. Partners divide everything. That's nothing to do with Sumchas. That's partial owners. Okay, now the Gemara says Tana. Start in a brayso. Amar Allah Zesiani Naitel. The person comes along and says, I'm taking back my olive trees. So it says, Ain't Shaimalei, we don't let him do it. My time, what's the reason? Because once the trees are planted, we don't want him to uproot trees in Israel. Rabbi Yirmiyah says about this, this takes a great rabbi to say a statement like that. Tanan Hassam, taught in a brayso, in a Mishnah, rather. Rabbi Yudah says, a makabel stay avesa min anachri. Makabel is someone that's a artist, he's a sharecropper. He's gonna take the field and work it and give a percentage of the produce to the owner. And the owner over here is a non-Jew. Somehow this field is a field that belonged to his ancestors, and he's taking it and he's working it for the non-Jew. I don't know how the non-Jew got it, whatever the case is. So when he gives his percentage to the owner, to the non-Jew, so Meiser V'Naisla has to take Meiser before he gives his percentage. Savrua, the Gemara understands like this: Meister Avesa. What does it mean that the field is ancestral field? We're talking about that it's Eretz Yisrael, but not that it actually belonged to his ancestors. It's a field in Israel. But my Karlis Avesa. So why do we call it ancestral field? It says stay Avram Yitzchak Yaakov because it belonged to Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. Kasavar, and we're going to follow the opinion that Ein Kinyan Lenacher Beit Shel Afkir Miad Meiser. That just the fact that a non-Jew owns it, that doesn't mean that you don't have to take Meiser from it. The non-Jews doesn't take Meiser, but if you come and buy produce from it, that produce is produce of Israel, and it's chayav in Meiser. Yeah, ignoramus is a Jew. That's chayav in Meiser. Here, our question is, if just like you can sell your chametz for Pesach and then buy it back after Pesach, can you sell the land to a non-Jew and then be exempt from taking Meiser when you get the produce? So we're saying over here that no, it doesn't matter, because just because he owns it, it's still land from Israel. It's not like buying pig. This is like, just because it's a guy, it's still treif, right? So doesn't change anything. So it's over here, the produce is land of Israel. Even if a non-Jew owned it, it doesn't help. Yeah, that whole discussion about Shemitah with selling it is a totally different discussion. You can sell the property to avoid Shemitah. That was we call it Heter Mechira. So, but there's a machlekes over here. If when a non-Jew owns it, if that takes it out from Meiser. And then there's one other point over here, a makabel kechaycher dami. And a sharecropper is like a chayker. Now, chayker has a slightly different arrangement with the owner. The makabel gives a percentage of the produce. The chayker is a renter that has to give produce to the owner, but it's a set amount every year. It doesn't have to do it. It's not a ratio. It's not a ratio of how much. It's a fixed price. So now, when it comes to a renter, ma chayker, a lease, to lease it. Ma chayker bein avad bein la yavad bayisuri, whether it produced, whether it didn't produce, bein avad bein la yavad. How do they translate that? Let me see.
Tenant farmer.
So, just as a tenant farmer, whether the field produces a crop or whether it does not produce a crop, is required to procure produce from somewhere, and tithe it, and then give it to the landowner. It's just like paying his debt. Okay, so the
Yeah,
rule
that's the thing about the kokir. It doesn't have to be from this land.
doesn't have to be from this land because he just owes him a certain amount of grain every year. Because he can't pay up your debt with untithed, unfixed grain. So also the sharecropper is as if he's paying his debt. So therefore he has to take meiser before he gives it. So that's what we're understanding over here, that he has to take meiser before he pays the non-Jew his share. Amalei Rav Kana Rav Papi, Amalei Rav Zvid. Rav Kana said either to Rav Papi or to Rav Zvid. Elahad Tanya, but 1 second, was taught in a brayso. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer. Rabbi Yehuda says the same Rabbi Yehuda that we had before. Makabel stay avaysim mi matzik nachri ma'aser v'naisin lai. Over here it says if someone is a sharecropper in a field of a matzik. Matzik is like a bandit. What are they translated? Oppressor. Someone that that probably took the field from someone, and now he shows up. This sharecropper shows he's going to work it. Before he gives them his share, he has to take meiser. My area matzik. Why specifically a oppressor? Filain matzik nami. It could be a regular person. Ella lo'ilam. Rather, we have to change the pshat. Yesh kinyan lenacher beretz Yisrael af kimyad meiser. Really, if a non-Jew owns it, it should really be exempt from meiser. Umakabel af kachaychedami. And when someone is a sharecropper, he is not like someone that that has to pay a set price. Okay. So he should be exempt. What it means is like this, that he really should not have to take meiser, because when a non-Jew owns a property, it's not chayav in meiser. And the Jew that's taking his share, and giving the non-Jewish owner his share, really the non-Jewish owner's share is totally exempt. It's not that he's taking everything and then has to pay partially. No, he's only taking his share. The other part belonged the whole time to the non-Jew, so that's totally exempt. So my stay avaisav, what does it mean that it's his field? It's stay avaisav mamish. Over there, it literally belonged to his parents. And what we're saying is like this: there was someone that came in and was taking it the day of the consider rabbanon, and it's this person specifically. The sages put on him a penalty. I did the chaviva le'tfei va'azal mekabelei le'tfei va'azal mekabela avalinis dal malay. What we want is that he should. The reason why he's going into this field is because it's his parents' field and he wants to work it. And even though there's someone here that's taking it away from them, but he cares about it. But what we really want is we want him to purchase the field back from this person, to take it out of their hands. But for but if it would be another person, then we wouldn't put the penalty on him to take the meiser. In other words, we're making it more difficult for him to work it. We want him to purchase it. Why did they put a penalty on him? So that it should be definite in his hand, which means that he should actually buy it from them. So we're making it hard for him to be a laborer in this field. It would be easier for him to be an owner of the field. Rabbi Yomi says about this guy that this requires a great rabbi to paskin like this, to say that we're going to put a penalty on someone that's working his parents' property, so that we're encouraging him to make a purchase instead of working it. Yeah,
It's the original tough love.
tough love, right? It's my, yeah.
Why are they putting the penalty on him and not this bandit that took the field? Because this oppressor says like he didn't acquire legally.
Right.
Like it should. Like, human logic is to be more strict on the one that.
Yeah, but
took the
where,
land
but
illegally.
the what's it called is not Jewish.
None of them are Jewish.
What do you mean?
The one that inherited his land
It's Jewish.
is.
Yeah,
thought
you have a
Italy
Jewish guy.
wasn't.
A Jewish guy in the land of Israel. He has a property, but there's a non-Jew in there that's living there. That took the property, and now this guy's working for the person that's not even the owner.
So it's the same case. The first.
Yeah, it would come out that it's the same case.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's what I was confused.
Yeah. That's what it seems.
I thought it was two different cases. The first one, it was
Originally, it was two different cases, and then now we put it together that it actually belongs to him. Stay avesa means that it's actually his field, it's actually his parents' field.
But this oppressor, it says like in the notes that he acquired it illegally. It
Right.
sounds like a different case, not that he inherited from.
No, the other case that no one inherited. There's a people own property. An oppressor comes in, takes the property, and then the inheritor, the real inheritor, ends up being a sharecropper in that property, and we're making this real inheritor pay miser, make it more difficult to be a laborer in the property. And the reason is because we want him to purchase it back. We're expecting that because it's his parents' property, he's going to do everything he can to get it. Itzmar, it was stated, son goes into his friend's property, but he plants trees, without permission. You're a professor?
Yeah.
You hear the problem?
No.
He doesn't have permission to plant those trees there. So, but he wants to plant moringa trees in everyone's property. In the middle of the night, Amarav, he's going to get paid, but the lesser price. The lesser price means whatever the increase is. If the labor or the increase is less, that's what they're going to have to give. The owner of the property is going to have to pay for those trees, but not the full price.
Oh.
Shmuel says, we do is we have to evaluate how much a person would have wanted this field to be planted. Now, sometimes that field is not supposed to be planted. There's no machlekes between the first Rav and Shmuel. Depends if it's a field that was meant to be planted. If it's a field that's meant to be planted, then you pay him whatever it would cost for someone to put the trees in there. If it's a field that wasn't meant to be in, then he's going to get the lower price. That statement of Rav, he gets the lower price, that wasn't said clearly. That came from out of a story. The who does the Rav, there was a person that came to Rav. Amalei Zil Shumlei. Go evaluate. I guess he planted trees and now he wants to get the money, right? Go evaluate what it cost. Amalei Leibine says, I don't need them. I don't need the trees. I don't want it. It happened to be a grain field, and he's put trees over there. Amalei Zil Shumlei Viadal Tachtaina. So evaluate what the value is, and then he'll get the lower price. Amalei Leibina. I don't want it at all. Let's say Chasi, the Gadra would come in play afterwards. They saw that he had put up a fence and he was actually making sure no one took the fruits of the trees. He started protecting them. He says, no, the opposite. He says, now we see that you really want the trees. Now you have to pay the full price. Okay. Itzmar, we have another statement. Someone goes into his friend's ruins of a house and he starts building it up. He starts doing construction on the house. And he doesn't have permission to do that. He's just building it up. And then he comes back and he says, I'm taking out all the improvements that I made to the house.
Who owns that house?
Ruvain owns a house. Shimon comes in, Shimon's construction company comes in and starts building it up. And then Ruvain maybe doesn't pay or something, or maybe doesn't send the bill. He didn't ask. And then Shimon says, okay, I'm taking out all the improvements. Rav Nachman Amar Shaimelei says, okay, he takes it. Rav Sheish Amein Shaimelei, Rav Sheish says he can't take it. Meisvei, the Gemara has a question. Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer, Beishamai Yom Shaimelei, Beisil Amein Shaimelei. Beishamai says that we listen to him, he's allowed to take it back. Beisil says he's not allowed to take it back. Rav Nachman Amar Beishamai, Rav Nachman says that you're allowed to take it back. We let the guy take it out. That's exactly the opinion of Beishamai. Rav Nachman doesn't go like Beishamai. Says Hudamar Kiyaitana. The truth is that there's another opinion over here. He left it out. Tanya was starting a brayso. Shreiman lai divrei Reb Shimon ben Elazar. Reb Shimon ben Elazar says he was probably a student of Reb Meir, except according to the Rambam, a little different. But and Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Aimer Beishama Yaimrim Shreiman Beisalim Shemle. According to Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, it's machlekes Beisal Beishamai. According to Reb Shimon ben Elazar, there's no machlekes. Everyone says that he's allowed to take it. My Havi Allah. What's the end over here? So, Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yaakov says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Bebayis, if he built up a house, then Shaimanle, we let the guy take it out, take back his beams. Besada, if it was a field that he planted, then in Shaimanle, we don't let him take his trees out. Besada, my time. Well, what's the reason why he can't take the trees out? Mishum Yishav Eretz Yisrael, because we want Israel to be inhabited, and with the more trees, there's more growth. Ikadamrida, those that say Mishum Kachsha Da'ara, because it weakens the land. My Beinayo, it weakens the land once you put the trees in. So we don't want you to take it out. Ikabeinayo Chutz La'aretz. The difference, my Beinayo, what's the difference between them? Ikabeinayo Chutz La'aretz. According to the one that says that it weakens the land, if you would take the trees out, so we don't let you do that even in Chutz La'aretz, because there's an owner to this property. He doesn't want you digging up his property, weakening the land. But if it's because of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, then we say only in Israel we want the trees to stay there, but outside of the land of Israel, we don't care if Johnny Appleseed has trees everywhere. It doesn't matter. Okay. Okay, let's leave it over here. Guys, remember tonight. Tonight is our anniversary party.
What time? And where?
Right after Ma'ariv.
In your house?
No, it's here in the show. It's going to be upstairs.